Good morning, everybody. Good Monday, a new week. We're getting into March. The days are starting to get warmer and lighter. We changed the clock next week. Things are looking upward. More and more people are vaccinated. But I want to talk about America's obsession and last night's interview of Meghan and Oprah. I think almost 100 million people watched the interview between Meghan and Oprah, and CBS was selling the ads for ridiculous money. And for weeks before, everyone was talking about this interview. I'm really not going to address the details of what Meghan said, because if what she said is true, it's terrible. And racism, of course, has no place in our society. And someone to be judged by the skin of their color is abhorrent to us as Jews, as Torah values. But we only heard one side of the story. But it's interesting that America has an obsession with the British monarchy. You know, it was a few years ago for Gurney's 40th birthday. We took a red eye on a Saturday night. It was actually the end of March, probably the beginning of April, right before Pesach, and we went to London for a couple of days. And I remember one day we said, everyone told us you got to take a tour of the Tower of London. So Gurney and I went to take a tour of the Tower of London, and we got a tour by one of the people who work for the Queen, and it was a 2-hour tour. And all they did on the whole tour, literally, as we went from place to place, they showed us who was executed here, who was beheaded here, and how they executed them and what happened. They had to pay their executor. And I turned to Gurney, I said, this obsession, look who these people were. You know, you go to Israel, and you go to ancient Israel, and you look at its history. We speak about building, about creating, about ideas, about values. And you think about the British monarchy, and you think about, Windsor and, King Edward and the Nazis and Hitler and the collaboration and some of what went on in their history. And you question, a lot of what Meghan says, and it says, 1 second, maybe she was right. In any case, I remember how I felt after going to the Tower of London. I much preferred going to Churchill's bunkers and seeing what Churchill did to save the Western world in the 20th century, literally single-handed. In fact, one of the funny things I remember is when we took the tour with one of the queens, I'm forgetting what they're called, they dress a certain way. There's only a certain amount of them that work for the Queen. And we took the tour, and he was quite funny. And he says, any Americans here? And we raised our hand. There was maybe 100 people. It was a rainy day in London. What's new? And then the guy says, well, just by the way, the war started before 1942. And he was making a joke, but it's true. The Americans got in late. It was Winston Churchill who single-handedly fought against the Nazis in a remarkable way. So for me, going to London and seeing the bunkers of Churchill and where he led the war from was much more inspiring than going to the Tower of London and hearing about the 700 or 1,000 people that were butchered by the monarchy by King George this and King George that, and et cetera, et cetera. But I wanted to talk about a different lineage because I want to speak about positive. And I wanted to talk about this week's Torah portion and then connect it to something else. So in this week's Torah portion, we read about the architect of the tabernacle. The Jews built a tabernacle for God in the desert. God says, but Asuli Migdash, make me a tabernacle and I will dwell within them. And the Jews build it. And in this week's Torah portion, the Torah begins by telling Moses, God telling Moses, hey, see, I put before you Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur. And with him I put Aholiab, the son of Achisamach. These were the two architects, the Frank Lloyds of the desert, so to speak, the greatest architects who envisioned and built and created this edifice where God would dwell and rest his Shekhinah, his presence. But it's interesting because 3 times the Torah tells us, Re'eh, see, God tells Moses, and then 3 times in different places it says his name, who was Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur. First of all, what does it mean God tells Moses to see? What does it mean, see, I put it in front of you? What's the idea of vision? Secondly, why are we fixated on telling us not just Bezalel and not just his father, but his grandfather? In fact, the surprising thing is, when it comes to Aholiab, who was his partner, we just hear his father's name. He was Ahaliab, the son of Achisamach. So why, when it comes to Bezalel, do we not just hear that his father's name was Uri, which means light, but that his grandfather was Hur? And of course, in order to understand this answer, you have to understand who Hur was. Who was Hur? And Hur, we know, was the son of Miriam and Caleb. Caleb was one of the spies that Moses sent. The only out of 12, there were two that were loyal to Moses and the vision of God. It was Joshua and Caleb. And Caleb married Miriam, Moses' sister, and they had a son, Hur. Now, Hur we only hear about a few times in the Bible. The first time we hear about Hur in the Bible is when Moses has to fight the Amalekites. The Amalekites want to wipe out the Jews right after the giving of the Torah. And Moses lifts his hands as the Jews are in war. And he has Joshua and Caleb holding up his hands. Joshua on one side, and Hur on the other side. So Hur and Joshua are helping him. And every time they lifted his hands, the Jews would win. And when his hands would go down, the Jews would lose. And of course, it's a metaphor for the inspiration of Moses, but we won't go there now. But the second time we hear about Hur is when Moses goes up to get the Ten Commandments from God. He takes Joshua, his greatest disciple. Now, who's going to be in charge of the Jewish people, inspire them, lead them, guide them? He leaves two people. He leaves Aaron, his brother, the high priest, and he leaves Hur, which tells us something about Hur. You have over 1 million Jews, probably a few million Jews, and here you have Hur and Aaron, the two people, the high priest and Hur, who are in charge of the Jewish people. And he's the one who earlier had held up Moses' hands. Yet, we never hear about him again. What happened to Hur? And the rabbis tell us something fascinating and very tragic. And when the Jews decided to sin with the golden calf and to worship an idol, Hur tried to stop them. But the Jews went so crazy, and the Jews were in such a pendulum about doing this, that they literally murdered Hur. Hur was murdered for trying to stop the Jews from sinning with the golden calf. And that's when Aaron realized what was going on, that the Jews are crazy. And that's why what he tried to do is he said, let's make a celebration tomorrow. He realized that if he tries to stop them, they'll kill him too. So all he wanted to do was push them off and postpone them and hope that Moses will come down soon, which of course didn't happen soon enough, and the Jews sinned with the golden calf. But sometimes you might think, what happened to Hur? Hur was an idealistic guy. He tried to stop the Jews from sinning with the golden calf, yet he got killed. There's no remembrance to Hur. Hur had a vision, he had an idea, he was passionate, he was a leader, but it ended with zero. Comes along the Torah and tells us, Moshe, Re'eh, see, you know why I chose Hur? Bezalel, you know why Bezalel had a vision to be able to build a tabernacle for God, to have that idea and to be able to implement it? Because of his grandfather. You think what Hur did was in vain. You think that Hur dying, he was an idealist, but Hur's gone. But no, his grandson is the remarkable man he is because of the self-sacrifice, because of the vision, because of the love and connection, commitment to God that his grandfather had. And that's why every time the Torah mentions Bezalel's name, unlike his partner, it doesn't just mention his father, it mentions his grandfather. Because it's a message to us. It's a message to us to remember and to know that we are able, and we are the ones who inspire our grandchildren. And also we are the ones who were inspired by our grandchildren, grandparents, what made us who we are. Why are we who we are? Because of where we came from. God says, hey, see for yourself. Who are these people? Who is Hur? Who is Bezalel? He's a product of his grandfather. You know, there's a famous song that I love singing at our Friday night table, which is called Who Will Be the Zaidy? And it's a song made by someone who returned to Judaism. He lived in Canada. He passed away. Moshe Yes. And he would sing a song about this kid who had all these inspirations from his grandfather, and his grandfather would teach him the songs and the Yiddishkeit, and then his grandfather passed away. And the end of the song is he turns around and says, who's going to be the grandfather of my grandchildren? Of my children, who's going to be their Zaidy? Who are they going to be able to look up to and be inspired by? He goes, who will be the Zaydis of our children? Who will be their Zaydis if not we? Who will be the Zaydis of our children? Who will be their bubbies if not we? And the message is clear. Hur God says, hey, Moshe, see, you want to know what Bezalel is? You want to know what gave him his commitment, his dedication to be who he is? It wasn't, hey, Bezalel ben Uri ben Chur, his grandfather and his self-sacrifice made Bezalel who he is. You want to know who we are? It's the self-sacrifice our parents and grandparents had. You want to know who our children will be? It's what they're going to see in us. It's pretty scary, right? So we better get our act together and be better and be more committed and be more connected. Last week I went to get the vaccine. It was on Tuesday. And when you go, you don't know which vaccine you're going to get. And you just go and you trust that whichever one's available, you're grateful that you were able to get the vaccine. And that's it. You don't choose. But I was happy because I got the Pfizer vaccine. And the Pfizer vaccine, I'm sure all of you heard about the CEO of the Pfizer vaccine. His name was Dr. Albert Bourla. He's the CEO of Pfizer. And he gave a fascinating interview to the Jewish Museum in which he spoke about his family. They came from a little island called, I think, Salonika, Greece, or Thessaloniki. I'm not sure how to pronounce it myself. And his grandfather and his uncle survived the Holocaust because of kind Catholics who gave them forged papers, and they lived it out in Athens, Greece. But what is more remarkable is that his mother, Sarah, Dr. Albert, the way his mother survived the Holocaust was because her sister, unfortunately, married a Christian and converted. But she took in Sarah into their house. But then Sarah was ratted out by someone, and she was sent to a prison, which from there the Jews were sent to be killed. And Sarah's sister's husband, his name was... I'm forgetting myself. His name was Costas Dimadis. He was a Christian, but he took a big bribe to the head of the Nazis at the prison, and he bribed him not to send his sister-in-law to death. But Sarah's sister didn't trust him, and every day she would go watch as these trucks would come and take the Jews away from this prison. And sure enough, she was right. One day, she saw them take her sister Sarah onto that truck, and she ran to her husband, Dimadis, and he ran to the head of the Nazis there, Max Merton, I think was his name. And he screamed at him, "You promised me, I gave you money." It was a huge bribe. And suddenly, as these Jews are standing in the outskirts of town, being ready to be shot and killed for being Jewish, a BMW pulls up with papers from the head Nazi, Max Merton. And they take Sarah and one other girl, and they get her into the BMW. And as they're turning away, they hear the shots. Here there are Jews being killed, and they're being saved. But Dr. Albert Berta says that one of the most remarkable things about his mother was that she didn't shy away from speaking about her story and how she was saved and how they had to use this miraculous gift that God gave them to be saved, to inspire the world, to help the world, to make this world a better place. And here he is, the CEO of Pfizer, which unequivocally we could all agree had the biggest impact on us the last year and literally saving our society. So many people are vaccinated, and the one that came out first and has been given the most vaccines in Israel and America is Pfizer. Moderna is amazing too, but nothing's like Pfizer. And their CEO, he says, imagine, there was 50,000 people. It was a bustling city, Saloniki, where my grandparents lived, and only 2,000 survived, and my grandparents and my mother was one of them. And he used that to inspire others. Re'ei nasati itcha. God says, Moses, see, you see Bezalel? Look back at Uri, look back at Chur. It all comes back from Chur, self-sacrifice. When you look at Albert Berta and you look about what he did, and you think about his remarkable parents and grandparents and how after they survived, they rebuilt a family and they spoke about the tragic destruction and murder of so many Jews and how they were impacted to become better people. And that's what we have to be. Remember, who will be the Zaydys of our children if not you and I? Who will be their bubbies if not we? Have a great day.